Heidi ho. Hi, everybody. Welcome. I'm glad to be here with you. We'll get started in just about 2 minutes. I always kind of sign on just about 2 minutes early just to give everyone a chance to kind of drop into the session, get yourself comfortable. Doesn't start just right off the bat. But in 2 minutes, I'll get going for sure. So we always, as part of these workshops, we always do meditations. I have a couple to share with you here today. So if you need a cushion close by or something for your back or for your feet, you could arrange that now. Sometimes if I take workshops on meditation, I'll try to sit like on my cushion for the workshop. That hardly ever works. It gets so uncomfortable after a while, right? So I usually I've learned to start to put it just close by so I can just transition to my cushion when it's time for the meditations. But whatever works best for you. We've got just about 1 more minute till we'll get started. I'm glad you chose to join me here today. Join everybody here today. I think I've got some good stuff to share with you. Today's workshop kind of attends to the disconnect we can feel sometimes between our formal mindfulness practice or our meditation practice that we do at home and what happens to our minds and our experience out in the world. So that's what today's session will be about. Just about 30 or so more seconds and we'll get started. I'm glad that you're here. I think I said that already, but it's all good. Nice to hear it multiple times, hopefully. Just kind of waiting for it to begin. Can't wait. I love sharing these with you. I hope that they're of benefit to you as well. And it looks like we are ready to go. So welcome everybody. I'm Michelle DuVal. I'm the director of the Mindful Center. So this workshop is called Street Smart Mindfulness. Street Smart Mindfulness. So what this means is that the practices that I'm sharing with you here today are the practices that can help you out there, right? Out on the streets, so to speak. When you're in public spaces, when you're running your errands and attending public events, when you're out participating in community life, right? So when you're out and away from the comforts and privacy and even security even of your own home. Anytime we get around groups of people, there are different challenges to face as compared to when we're alone or when we're just with our families and our homes, our loved ones, when we're with only the people we actually choose to be around, right? There are different challenges linked to being out in public spaces with all of those other people. So these are the mindfulness practices that can help you be mindful, share your presence, remain calm and collected, feet on the ground, even when the challenges of being out in public spaces might arise, right? People getting angry, their needs aren't being met, and they're choosing to react in, let's say, unskillful ways. So these are also some of the practices that can help us stay calm and collected, feet on the ground, and still able to enjoy being out in the world, even when there might be some challenging people or circumstances that we encounter out there. One of the hallmarks of being out in public spaces is that you don't always necessarily get all of your needs met when you want them to get met, right? You got to stand in lines. You got to wait for others. You got to share the space. And if you acknowledge that there's all different kinds of people in the world, then we also have to acknowledge that, for example, some people don't always have goodwill in their hearts, or some people get intoxicated and act out, or arguments happen. I remember not too long ago here in Albuquerque, two men got in an argument over their movie theater seats. One guy thought the other guy was in his seat and the guy wouldn't move. So the one guy actually shot and ended up killing the other guy right there in the movie theater over a disagreement about their seats. So though there are a lot of really beautiful qualities to being out in the world, there's also the fact that you don't always know who you're sharing the space with, what their agenda is, what they've been through in their lives, and maybe even what they think is right and wrong, right? So the definition of being street smart is having the experience and knowledge necessary to deal with the potential challenges and even dangers at times of life in an urban environment. So being street smart means having the experience and knowledge necessary to deal with the potential challenges and even dangers at time of life in an urban environment. And what makes an environment urban is simply that there's a wide variety of other people put together, right? It's the city or the town where people live in closer proximity to each other than in more rural communities. And there's usually a wider variety of the types of people, all different, coming together with different needs and viewpoints and histories, etc. So specifically, street smart mindfulness are the practices that can help us to navigate the times in our lives when we're out and around a lot of other people, and a wide variety of people at that. One of the reasons I think that street smart mindfulness is so important to take a look at is because I think that most people kind of leave their mindfulness at home when they go out in the world, right? So it's not something that a lot of us commonly think about practicing when we're out in more public spaces. It's like if you're a practitioner, you go out in the world, and then when you get home again, then you get recentered, regrounded, pick up your mindfulness practice again. But I'd really love to invite you into a different way of thinking about your mindfulness practice. And the first part of this invitation is to really begin to understand that your mindfulness practice can go with you everywhere. Mindfulness is highly portable, right? Like your cell phone or your chopstick. You can literally take it with you just about anywhere. Your mindfulness practice, once you get used to thinking of it this way and practicing it this way, your mindfulness moves with you. It travels with you. It goes where you go. You just have to remember to practice when you're out there in the general population, right? So one thing I think is really helpful toward this is to begin to think about your mindfulness practice like an inner technology. An inner technology. So just like your cell phone is a form of technology, but it's outer technology, meaning it's outside of you, right? So your mindfulness practice is a form of inner technology. So the word the word technology here refers to the application of scientific knowledge for practical purposes. That's one definition of technology, the application of scientific knowledge for practical purposes. So we know what happens to people scientifically when they practice mindfulness. We know scientifically, empirically, that most people, not everyone, of course, but most people, when practicing mindfulness correctly, can literally change their physical and emotional experience while it's happening, simply by being present for it. Let me say that again because it's so important. So we know scientifically through clinical evidence that most people, not everyone, but most people, when practicing mindfulness correctly, can literally change their physical and emotional experience for the better simply by being present for it. So now the next question is, how does this happen? How does this function? How does simply being present for an experience change our physical and emotional experience of it, and usually for the better? So primarily, it's because without mindfulness, what we most commonly do is fight or resist all the aspects of an experience that we don't like, right? So we fight or resist or tense up against, complain about even all the parts of an experience that we don't like or that we don't want to be happening. So let's say, for example, you and a friend are going to a concert, right? So you're going out there in the world and you're excited to see the band, but then there's all this traffic and you're stuck in it for like 45 minutes. So now, even though you're excited to see the band, you probably don't like being stuck in traffic. And so typically we kind of hem and haw and complain, oh, it's taking forever, and our bodies tense up. So we're fighting or resisting this aspect of the experience. And then let's say you're there at the concert and you're enjoying the music, you're loving the band, but then there are these two guys right behind you who probably drank too much and now they're arguing loudly during all the ballads, right? And it's uncomfortable yet, right? It's a yucky part of the experience. And it can really be a part of the experience sometimes of being out in the world. Not everyone behaves in the ways that we want them to. And so we get tense. We don't like it. We resist it. Those stupid guys. Why can't we all just get along, right? And nowadays there's this whole other element of being out in public in that a lot of people have guns nowadays. So not only is it uncomfortable when people start arguing, but it can also be really scary at times. So even though we might love the experience of going to see live music, there are also a lot of aspects of the experience that we probably don't like. And so without mindfulness, we tend to fight them. We tend to resist them. We tend to get stressed out against those elements of being out in the world that we don't like. And then as we age, it's so easy to no longer even want to go out to things like concerts anymore or whatever it is because of all that extra trouble, right? All the stuff that we don't like about going out into the world. All that extra trouble and stress can just suck up our energy. So now it all just seems like too much as we age, right? So that's typically how we live our lives out there without mindfulness. Instead of just being able to be with an experience in its totality, just be present with the things we like and with the things we don't like, because they're a part of the experience as well. We tend to fight against or resist the aspects of the experience that we don't like or don't want. I was with my son the other day and someone asked him how school was going. And he responded by saying, well, it's kind of a mixed bag. He said, you've got some grapes in there, which are pretty good, and some Cheerios, which are also pretty good. But then you also have some broccoli in the bag, and that gets everything else mushy and gross. That's totally a kid's interpretation of a mixed bag, right? Can you imagine all those things together in the same bag, Cheerios and broccoli? But it's a great way to understand a lot of our lives out there in public. Lots of grapes, lots of beautiful elements that can a lot of times get mixed up with some broccoli or some elements that make some of the other elements not taste quite so good anymore, right? So our typical habit without mindfulness is to resist or tense against all that broccoli or all those things that we don't want to be happening while they're happening. And this really brings us into resisting the overall flow of how things are appearing and happening for us moment by moment. So let's think about that for a moment. In fact, let's do a contemplation together right now on this very aspect of our existence, how we many times are resisting the flow of reality, the flow of how things are appearing and happening for us moment by moment when we're out in the world, because it can be such a mixed bag at times. Things we want, those grapes, and things we don't want, that broccoli, right? Okay, let's do a little contemplation. So you can go ahead and close your eyes. Close your eyes. And a contemplation is just where you kind of think about some things, some facets, some aspects of your life, and then just notice what comes up, what feelings come up, or what subsequent thoughts come up. And your job is just kind of observe the contemplation. Okay? So I'll just ask you a couple of questions. So, how often do you want things to be other than they are when you're out there in the world? Just kind of think about that for a moment. How often do you want things to be other than they are when you're out in the world? Maybe wanting people, your coworkers, to be different. Maybe your office at work is always super chilly and you kind of resist that. You hate that part about being at work. Maybe you don't like the crowds sometimes at the supermarket or the bank, wherever it is. You don't like standing in lines at the post office. Maybe you don't like the traffic, looking for parking spots. So we're just kind of reflecting on our daily life out in the world and just kind of noticing that we all have some aspects that we definitely don't like, that we resist about being out in the world, right? What are they for you? Okay, you can go ahead and just open your eyes. So if I were to ask you to write a list of all the things you don't like about being out in public spaces, we could probably do that with relative ease, right? You don't like the crowds, you don't like the traffic, you don't like certain aspects of, your work life that you can't control, the temperature, or the environment, or the break room, or just whatever it is, the noise levels. So if we're able to be honest about our life at all, we start to see that this tendency is literally everywhere in our lives. It can be pervasive, invasive even, like a weed, this tendency to resist or not like or tense up against certain aspects of how our life unfolds that we don't like, right? This tensing up against the flow of reality until it really becomes a part of how we're living our lives. We like this aspect, we don't like this aspect, we like this, we don't like that. And so in any given day, there's always this aspect of our experience that we're resisting against or fighting against or tensing up against. So if we come back to the question of how simply being present for an experience changes our physical and emotional experience of it, it's because when we're just present for something, that's one of the fastest ways to stop fighting against it. It's one of the fastest ways to reduce the tension against those aspects of daily life out in the world that we don't like. Because being present for something implies that we're present for all of it in its totality, not just the parts that we like or that we want. So when we're present for an experience in our totality, it helps us reduce some of the fight that we experience against certain aspects of it. And so then our physical experience starts to change as we develop this ability to drop some of that tension that comes from fighting the moments. And our emotional experience changes as well, because if you think about it, if we no longer want what's happening to not be happening, just think about that. If we no longer want what's happening to not be happening, so that's the fight, right? We're stuck in traffic and we don't want that to be happening. Someone's arguing and we don't want that to be happening. So if we no longer want what's happening to not be happening, then we don't get upset with it. We don't get frustrated. We don't get disappointed. Because when we're fully present, we're not wanting the experience to be anything other than it already is. That's what presence is. It's just leaning into the experience as it is, in its totality, as it's arising, as it's happening, as it's unfolding. We're just present for the experience of it. So let's do a little meditation right now, and I want us to start this particular practice with our eyes open, because this is one of the facets of practice that can create a disconnect for us when we try to practice street smart mindfulness. When we go out into the world and we practice mindfulness, we almost always do it with our eyes open. So it can really be helpful to get some familiarity with moving into a mindfulness practice with your eyes open. So we're going to do a practice that I call dropping into space and place. Dropping into space and place. Okay, so with your eyes open, I just want you to be present for this moment. So what happens when you do that? So all we're doing is we're practicing being here and kind of shifting into our noticing mind. The mind that just notices. So with our eyes open, we can kind of begin to notice what it is we're seeing. So this is kind of dropping into place, right? And you can look around the space you're in. In fact, I encourage it. Just kind of noticing, observing, being present for the experience of seeing your surroundings, right? And in pure presence, it's not choosing, oh, I want to be present for this aspect of my surroundings, but not that aspect. Being present implies we're not differentiating, right? We're just here for the full experience. as you do this, you might start to notice an awareness of sounds as well. So that's part of the space you're in, part of the place. So just kind of noticing what you see and what you're hearing. There's a lot of times an urge to close your eyes, but just keep your eyes open. You don't have to stare at one spot. You just kind of move your head around, move your eyes, just like if you were sitting out in public right now and just kind of observing place and space. What's the experience like of being where you are in this moment? And still with our eyes open, I want you to begin to include also how you're feeling. So maybe noticing that you're tired or you're hungry or you've got an itchy mosquito bite. And still with our eyes open, see if you can keep your eyes open as we do this. This is an important part of this kind of practice. So noticing what you're seeing, noticing what you're hearing, and maybe even noticing how your surroundings are making you feel right now. Like I feel a little bit chilly. So my surroundings are giving me that feeling, right? But I'm also in my home, so being in my home feels good. I feel a sense of relaxation, maybe that we don't feel when we're out in the world. Whatever it is for you, just noticing how being where you are right now is making you feel. Can you feel your breath? Can you feel your feet on the ground or your tush in your chair? Can you just kind of root or connect your awareness to space and place and how space and place are making you feel? maybe you have a window close by you can look out at, or maybe you choose to look at something beautiful. I've got a window with trees outside and sunshine. And noticing how that makes you feel to kind of shift what it is you're paying attention to. And just being present, leaning into this experience as it's happening. And then maybe we can shift what we're looking at, and maybe seeing if you can look at something not so pretty. Like I can see a part of my desk that's really cluttered. So maybe choosing to put your attention on something that usually gives you some trouble to just be with. Some clutter or mess or a undone task. And can you just be with that? Notice how looking at that is making you feel. And then you just be with the feelings, feel the feelings. Typically, if something makes us feel unpleasant, we want to do something about it, either change the situation or ignore it, try to make those feelings go away. For this practice, I just want you to see if you can just be with those feelings, not do anything about the clutter or the undone task, and just let yourself feel how seeing that is making you feel. I'm starting to notice how this practice is really relaxing me, which is making me feel a little sleepy, if I'm honest. And so I just be with the feeling of feeling relaxed and a little sleepy. What is it for you? So just about one more minute where we're just really dropping into place and space, being here with this experience and how it's making you feel. You can look around at whatever you wish. Just kind of taking in the totality of the experience, not just the pieces that we like. Alrighty then. If you're like me and that practice made you a little sleepy, maybe just a little bit of movement to wake yourself up again. So one of the best ways to really begin a practice of street smart mindfulness is to begin to, as my father used to say, sprinkle your whole day, every day, with presence, with mindfulness, like those sprinkles on a cupcake, right? Just sprinkling your whole day, every day, with your presence, your choice to be here in your life as it is, as it's unfolding each and every day. So not just sitting on a cushion in meditation, right? One of the best ways to begin to do this is to begin to commit to doing that practice that we just did. I call it dropping into place and space. So if we can begin to commit to doing that practice that we just did 5 different times throughout the day, in all different kinds of places and spaces and scenarios out there in the world, for just about 5 cycles of breath. Okay? So I don't expect anyone to sit down and do what we just did for the length of time that we did it 5 times a day, every day. That's not practical, and that's not what Street Smart is really all about, because for most of us, it ain't going to happen, right? So in prep for this workshop, I literally sat down and timed 5 cycles of breath. So 5 in breaths, 5 out breaths, and it took about 25 seconds. So what I'm inviting you into is doing that practice that we just did for just about 25 seconds, 5 different times throughout the course of the day, in different places all throughout your day, out in the world, intentionally. So at the grocery store, at your desk, at your job, in the restroom, at times, driving your car, in the doctor's waiting room, sitting in traffic, at your kids' basketball game, at the gym, just wherever, whenever, for just about 5 cycles of breath, or about 25 seconds, just dropping in to place and space. And I chose 5 cycles of breath because it's easier to remember. We do it about 5 different times throughout the day in different places and situations for just about 5 cycles of breath, or 25 seconds. So 5 times 5 equals 25, right? So just dropping into place and space, dropping in, becoming present for where you are, what's happening, what you're hearing, what you're seeing, who else is sharing the space with you. And then a really important piece of it all is then, how is all of this making you feel, right? So the experience in its totality, not just the aspects you like or love or asked for or hope for, but all of it. Life is that mixed bag. Life sometimes mixes Cheerios with the dang broccoli, right? It just does. So doing a practice like this while we're out in the world, out on the streets, dropping into space and place, can really be how we begin to manifest street smart mindfulness. I've started to really practice a lot more mindfulness at my son's basketball games. So I used to play basketball in high school. I'm like 6 feet tall. I used to play basketball in high school. So I realize I have a rather strong, almost emotional connection to what he's doing. And I've noticed myself just getting just a little too agitated at times during the games. I feel like tense and yucky kind of in my body as I'm sitting there. I'm like nervous, and I'm like wanting him to do good just a little too much, right? And so here's a place for street smart mindfulness. I got my inner technology right here with me. All I have to do is remember to use it, remember to practice. And then I'll do the practice that we just did. Just watching, just listening, just feeling. No agenda, just noticing, observing, right there at the basketball game for just about 25 seconds at least, right? Sometimes I'll do it a little more. And I invite you all to find those times for yourself out in the world when you're feeling disconnected or stressed or even just kind of out of sorts. Or even when you're feeling pretty good, like when you're happy or content, you're feeling nourished. Why not drop in and be present for those moments as well when you're out in community and you're really feeling the nourishment of being around other fellow humans, right? Really feeling the feelings and being with them. One time when I was teaching my drug court class, I asked a student if they had been able to practice their mindfulness at all throughout the week. And he said he couldn't. He could not do it because he was always rushing around. He had more than one job and he was always rushing from one busy job to the next. But see, that's the fundamental disconnect that street smart mindfulness seeks to repair, right? You can practice mindfulness while you're rushing around. Being in a rush is an experience that you can practice being present for. Rushing and presence are not necessarily mutually exclusive. So how does it feel in your body to be moving that quickly? What's happening to your breath? What's happening to your balance? What are your eyes doing? What are you seeing? Where are you in time and space as you're rushing and noticing the feelings behind it? So it's not just like, how does it feel to rush? Oh, this feels bad and I hate it. And that's your street smart mindfulness, because that's not really mindfulness. Those are the thoughts about how rushing around feels, right? Those are the judgments about how rushing around feels, which is a form of thinking. Thinking is not the same thing as mindfulness. Mindfulness is that choice to be present, to move into awareness. And awareness, just noticing, observing, receiving the experience, is not at all the same thing as thinking about the experience or judging it, right? So street smart mindfulness invites us into just being with the rushing. In this case, being with and in the experience of it as it is, as it's happening. Okay. So now I want to switch gears a little bit, kind of the second half of things, because I want to attend now to one really important piece of the puzzle. And that is the part of being out in the world that has to it that element of possible or potential danger. So I shared in a video last year that on the day I got married, one of our great friends who wasn't able to come to the wedding, he was shot and killed while he was out that night with his friends. We all probably know someone or a friend of a friend, and we've all definitely heard the stories on the news of people in our society being really affected by everyone having guns, gun violence. And there's a lot of anger out there right now as well. I think that bears acknowledgement. There's a lot of unhappy people looking for someone to blame for their unhappiness, looking for a release for their feelings of unhappiness. And sometimes when I talk about being mindful out in public, someone will say, so what, I'm just supposed to be present, feeling my breath while that argument behind me is escalating? No way, lady, you're crazy. That's crazy. Well, no, that's not at all what I'm saying here. See, many people think that the practice of mindfulness is being passive, just like letting everything just wash all over you, wash through you while you do nothing about any of it. But being present at my son's basketball games doesn't mean I don't cheer and get totally involved. It just means that I do it, A, with a little less of that unnecessary tension and agitation, and B, that I do it with a little more presence, with a little more connection to the moment. So some years ago, my husband and I and some friends were out at, I don't know, some cafe where we were having a beer on a sunny Friday afternoon. And some guys in the cafe started arguing. And it was a kind of an outdoor cafe right along the parking lot. And the wait staff asked the guys to leave the cafe. And so they just continued to argue out in the parking lot for all of us sitting in the cafe for us to see. And we were all watching because they were like really yelling at each other, calling each other names, and it was really escalating. And I'm sitting there starting to get really uncomfortable. My thoughts are like kind of starting to spin, not really thinking straight anymore. I'm just kind of like wrapped, like watching. Couldn't believe it was happening. It was like we were all in this kind of like trance almost, watching these guys go after each other. And then I happened to remember my mindfulness, my inner technology. It binged, right? And so I got myself out of my trance, and I really felt and was present for what I was feeling and what was happening, right? So I got aware of my surroundings, the people in them, what they were doing, and then how that was legitimately making me feel. And I did it on the fly, in the moment. Remember that street smart mindfulness is measured in moments, not minutes, right? And so I just got real present for just about, 3 to 5 moments, 3 to 5 seconds, whatever it is. And then I knew exactly what I needed to do. I needed to leave. And so I got up, I looked square on at my husband. I said, we got to go. And he was like, even like relieved that someone had finally popped up out of the trance of just sitting there watching all of this escalate. I'll never forget it. And he just popped right up out of his chair and he was ready to go. And it was like the trance was broken. And all of us, me and all my friends, we just kind of grabbed our stuff and we were out at our cars in about 15 seconds. So part of what I was being present for in those moments was my instincts, right? Which is a way that we process our experience through feeling instead of thinking. It's like those gut feelings, your spidey sense, as my kids call it, that's telling you to get the hell out of there, but that many times we're not tuned into enough to really listen to. We're not present for those kind of feelings. I knew very clearly in those moments of presence that nothing here was worth the chance of getting accidentally shot at while drinking a beer. And if I could help it, I didn't want to go out that way. So it was my very practice of street smart mindfulness that actually enabled me to take what I consider to be prudent and quick action in those moments. And as we were driving out, the police were driving in, thank goodness, so no one got hurt. But I knew it was right for me, for us, because I felt it. I was present for it. And that's kind of what gave me the spunk and the courage even to just go ahead and leave. So the last thing that street smart mindfulness does for us is make us passive. It actually can enable a kind of heightened awareness, which can then allow us to make those harder decisions sometimes. Now, I'm not saying it's fail-safe and that if everyone would just practice mindfulness, they wouldn't get caught up in violence. But I think we can all agree that a necessary aspect of keeping yourself safe out there in the world is a kind of heightened awareness of your surroundings and how those surroundings and the people in those surroundings are coming together to make you feel. And if the feeling is strong about just getting out of there, you get. Even if you miss the concert or the next beer, someone in your party doesn't like it or whatever it is. Street smart mindfulness can help you become more aware of your surroundings and how those surroundings are coming together. And then we process those surroundings with our feelings. And when we're in tune and present for our feelings, they can kind of key us into what we need to do. And probably any law enforcement person would say that one of the first defenses against being a victim of violence is awareness of your surroundings, right? Now, this brings forth another really important element of this practice. And that is that it's important to understand that mindfulness and just being aware of your surroundings isn't the same as like scanning your environment all the time for danger. We don't want to become paranoid out there, because then, like, what's the point, right? So there's awareness, being aware, and then there's looking for something, right? Looking for danger, looking for that possible person who's going to cause trouble. In and of itself, that's not the same thing as mindfulness. And that's a really important distinction to note here. Street smart mindfulness is just about the looking, the seeing, the noticing your environment and the people in your environment and how it's all coming together to make you feel, not specifically looking for something. So on your own, you might decide that's how you need to be, and that's your decision, of course. But the purpose of this workshop and of the practice of street smart mindfulness isn't to make you kind of like hyper aware, which really means that you're always like looking for something, that you're looking for something dangerous, you're looking for something problematic. Mindfulness is just the looking piece of things, not the looking for something in particular. Okay, so that's an incredibly important piece of street smart mindfulness, of using our practice just to become more aware of our surroundings, the people in them, and how it's all making us feel. And it takes a certain amount of presence to really begin to get in touch with our feelings and what we're feeling and what we're noticing when we're out within us, when we're out in public situations, right? So there's so much going on around us that it can be challenging sometimes to know what's going on within us. Let me say that again because it's so important. When we're out in the world, out on the streets, many times there's so much going on around us that it can be challenging sometimes to know what's going on within us. And so we practice, right? We practice becoming aware right while we're in those situations, right while all of everything is going on around us. We practice noticing how we're feeling when there's a lot going on around us. So this is so funny. My dad, to help people with this aspect of practice, my dad, when he was still teaching mindfulness, he used to, he'd be in a classroom setting, and I think he was at Presbyterian here in New Mexico. And he'd be guiding the students in the class. They were in a meditation, so they'd be feeling their breath. Everyone was quiet, sitting in their posture, feeling their bodies, noticing what's going on within them. And then my dad used to bring in the cleaning crew that was working in the building that he was teaching in. And he'd have the cleaning crew come in while the people are still meditating. He'd have the cleaning crew start vacuuming and cleaning all around everyone meditating, so that they could practice being internally aware while there was a lot going on externally, right? That's why it sometimes can be so helpful to meditate out in busier circumstances. It teaches us that skill of knowing, understanding what's going on within us when there's a lot going on around us. And once you get the hang of it, it really does get easier with practice. Now, there's a lot more that I could probably teach about bringing our practice out with us into the world, but there comes a point when we just can't kind of take anything else in, right? So I'd like to close this session with a practice that I use actually whenever I come home from being out in the world, when I come home from a concert or being out to dinner with friends or a movie, or come home from my kids' basketball game. So I personally, and I bet a lot of you can relate, I tend to get kind of overstimulated when I'm out. And so even though I like being around people and doing things out in the world, I can get to a point where I'm like, I'm full, I'm good. And now I just want to kind of take an out breath, so to speak. So we just took all of that information in this workshop, and when we're out in the world, we take all of that in, everyone's energies and the needs and all the colors and the sounds and the happenings and the stimulations of being out in the world. And then there comes a time when we need to just let it back out again, right? And so let's close with a practice that can help us do just that. Okay, so let's get ready to meditate. We can do this practice with our eyes closed. So if you wish to stretch and move a little bit, if that feels good, go ahead and do so as we prepare to meditate. Especially when I'm out in the world, we can get so unconscious of our bodies that we can unknowingly hold our shoulders really tight and tense, or it's just tiring, all the walking we've done out there. So whenever I come home, I always do just a little bit of movement to kind of ease up the body again. Release that which I've just taken in. And then whenever you're ready, you can just kind of just begin to sit. And maybe for this practice, we don't worry so much about our posture. You can just kind of sit and relax. Like we've just come home from a big day out in the world. You just kind of want to sit and relax, right? Getting yourself comfortable. Maybe taking a couple of nice deep breaths. And as you take these deeper breaths, I want you to especially pay attention to that out breath and really use it as an opportunity to kind of just release, push out, let go. So maybe one more nice deep breath. And then just letting your breath return to natural. And I want you to focus for some moments just on the feeling, the sensations of your out breath. So just kind of letting the in-breath happen and then really leaning into the experience of breathing out. You can just kind of imagine that everything that you've taken in, the energies, the information, whatever it is, just gets gently released on your out breath. Just imagine that happening. So in essence, you're really letting go of the past on each and every out breath, just releasing it. And you can imagine that with each out breath, you just become more and more relaxed, more and more at home. Each and every out breath brings us home. Now we can come to understand that we are home. Even if you're not physically at home, we can come home to self. We can come home to us, just being with us in the privacy of our own meditation. Just letting yourself come home to self, whatever that means and feels like to you, coming home. And I'm going to quietly sign off, letting you stay in this space of meditation for as long as you wish, whatever you choose. I hope that something here today brings you benefit. Remember your inner technology of mindfulness that you can take with you everywhere and anywhere. Why not? Sprinkling your day with presence. I'll see you next time.